Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
My name is Brennan, and I just turned 31 last month. Halloween has been my favorite holiday since I was a kid growing up in Portland. Every year, I organized the neighborhood trick-or-treating event at my parents' house. That tradition was about to change when Mom called. "We're canceling Halloween this year, sweetie. It's too expensive," she explained. I quietly set down my candy list, accepting her excuse. 2 days later, I discovered 6 first-class tickets to Arizona on their kitchen counter. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe to hear how this family betrayal unfolded. To understand why this discovery hit me so hard, you need to know a bit about my family. I grew up in a modest home in Portland with my parents, Diane and Frank, and my 2 younger siblings, Jake and Lily. We were never wealthy by any means. Dad worked as a mechanic at a local garage, and Mom was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. Money was always tight, especially during my early teenage years when the recession hit and Dad's hours got cut back. Christmas and birthdays in our household were simple affairs. No extravagant gifts or elaborate celebrations. We made do with what we had, and my parents were always upfront about our financial limitations. "We can't afford brand-name sneakers this year, Brennan. Or maybe next birthday we can think about that gaming system." I heard these phrases so often they became a soundtrack to my childhood. But Halloween was different. Halloween was magical because it didn't require much money to feel special. A few dollars worth of decorations, some creativity with homemade costumes, and suddenly our modest house became the neighborhood hotspot. Mom would make caramel apples from scratch, Dad would carve pumpkins with us, and we'd transform our small front yard into a spooky wonderland with sheets as ghosts and painted cardboard tombstones. As I grew older, I took over more of the Halloween planning. By the time I was 16, I was coordinating our entire block's trick-or-treating schedule, creating maps for the younger kids, and designing increasingly elaborate front yard displays. My parents seemed genuinely proud of how I'd taken this holiday, and made it something special not just for our family but for the entire neighborhood. When I moved out at 23 to a small apartment across town, there was never any question about where I'd spend Halloween. I always came back home to help decorate, to organize, and to keep the tradition alive. Even after Jake moved to Seattle for college and Lily got married and moved to the suburbs, I was the constant, the keeper of our family's most cherished tradition. This year was going to be the biggest yet. I'd been planning since August for what I called Halloween Spectacular, a combination haunted house, trick-or-treat central station, and community gathering. I'd sketched out designs for transforming the garage into a walk-through haunted mansion. I'd coordinated with neighbors about a progressive trick-or-treating route. I'd even reached out to local businesses for candy donations to make sure every kid who came by would leave with an overflowing bag of treats. My enthusiasm for Halloween had always been a bit of a joke in the family. There goes Brennan. Christmas in December, Halloween all year round, my dad would say with a chuckle, but beneath the teasing, I sensed appreciation. This was my contribution, my way of giving back to the family that had raised me and the community that had embraced us. My current situation wasn't exactly glamorous. I worked as a marketing specialist for a local company that sold organic pet food. The pay was decent but not spectacular, and my apartment was small but comfortable. I lived alone, though my girlfriend Amanda spent enough time there that half the closet had somehow become hers over the past 8 months. Amanda shared my love for Halloween, which was one of the many reasons we clicked when we met at a friend's costume party last year. She was dressed as a Victorian ghost, and I was a weather-beaten sea captain. We spent the entire night in character, spinning an elaborate tale for anyone who would listen about how my ship had gone down in a storm and she was the spirit who haunted me across the 7 seas. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers, and by the following week, we were inseparable. This Halloween would be our first together, and Amanda had been just as invested in the planning as I was. She had a talent for makeup and special effects, and had volunteered to create realistic wounds and transformations for anyone brave enough to sit in her chair. We'd spent countless evenings at my kitchen table, hunched over lists and diagrams, planning every detail of the Halloween spectacular. "This is going to be the best one yet," I told her just last week, as we finalized the candy purchase list. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it. Mrs. Abernathy even said she's inviting her grandchildren from Vancouver to come down for it." Amanda smiled and squeezed my hand. "It means a lot to you, doesn't it? This connection to your childhood home, keeping the tradition going." I nodded, not fully articulating how much it really did mean. It wasn't just about Halloween. It was about maintaining a thread of consistency in my life, a connection to my parents and siblings even as we all grew older and drifted in different directions. It was about creating magic in the same place where I'd first experienced it as a child. It was, in many ways, about love. Little did I know that the tradition I cherished so deeply was about to be shattered, not by financial necessity as I would soon be told, but by something far more painful to accept. I was in the Halloween aisle at Target when Mom called. The cart in front of me was already half filled with bags of candy, fake cobwebs, and a motion-activated spider that I knew would terrify and delight the neighborhood kids in equal measure. I had my list in one hand, phone in the other, methodically working my way through the preliminary purchases for the big event. When I saw Mom's name flash across my screen, I assumed she was calling to add to my shopping list, or to tell me about a Halloween decoration she'd spotted somewhere that would be perfect for our display. I answered cheerfully, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I compared 2 different variety packs of chocolate bars. "Hey Mom, I'm actually at Target right now grabbing some supplies. Did you need me to pick up anything specific?" There was a pause on the other end, just long enough for me to sense something was off. Mom's voice, when she finally spoke, had that artificially bright quality it took on when she was about to deliver bad news. "Brennan, sweetheart, I've been thinking about Halloween this year." I dropped the candy comparison and gave her my full attention. "What about it?" "I've got most of the planning done already. Dad and I just need to start building the haunted garage next weekend." Another pause. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Your father and I have been looking at our finances, and things are a bit tight right now." My stomach tightened. This wasn't the first time I'd heard about financial concerns from my parents, but it had been a while. Dad's garage had been doing well for the past few years, and Mom had picked up additional hours at the dental office. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they seemed comfortable. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" I asked, abandoning my shopping cart to step into a quieter corner of the store. "Oh, everything's fine. Don't worry too much," Mom said quickly. "It's just that the water heater broke last month, and we had to replace it. Then the property taxes were higher than we expected, and your father's car needed new brakes." I nodded to myself. These were all legitimate expenses, the kind that could stack up and create a financial pinch. "I understand. Do you need me to chip in for some of the Halloween stuff? I was planning to cover most of it anyway." No, Mom said firmly. "That's not what I'm saying. We've decided we should just cancel Halloween this year altogether. No decorations, no party, not even trick-or-treaters. We'll just turn off the porch light and have a quiet evening at home." The statement hit me like a physical blow. Cancel Halloween? Our Halloween? The tradition we'd maintained for well over 20 years? "But Mom, I don't understand. I'm covering most of the costs, and we already told the whole neighborhood about the Halloween spectacular. Mrs. Abernathy's grandkids are coming all the way from Vancouver." "I know, sweetie, and I feel terrible about that. But it's not just the money for decorations and candy. It's the electricity for all those lights, and the water for cleaning up afterward, and the time and energy that your father and I just don't have right now. We're not getting any younger, you know." I stood there in the middle of Target, surrounded by Halloween merchandise, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. This was more than a party being canceled. This was a family tradition, my connection to home, being discarded. "We're just going to need to tighten our belts for a while," Mom continued when I didn't immediately respond. "Maybe next year will be better." "I could host it at my apartment," I offered, though I knew immediately it wouldn't work. My small one-bedroom didn't have the space for the kind of event we'd planned, and the building manager would never approve a horde of trick-or-treaters roaming the halls. "That's sweet of you, but no. We just need a quiet year, Brennan. I'm sure everyone will understand. By the time I hung up, I felt hollowed out. I looked down at my shopping list, covered in my enthusiastic notes and sketches, now rendered meaningless. Slowly, I began returning items to the shelves, the motion-activated spider, the bags of candy, all of it going back as other shoppers gave me curious glances. That evening, I told Amanda about the conversation as we sat on my couch, the TV playing a horror movie neither of us was watching. "That's really strange," she said, frowning. "Halloween has always been such a big deal for your family, and it seems sudden to cancel it now, when you've already done so much planning." I shrugged, trying to appear more understanding than I felt. Money problems can come up quickly, and they are getting older. Maybe the whole thing has become too much for them. Amanda wasn't convinced. "But you offered to handle everything, even the costs. It just doesn't add up." I didn't want to admit it, but a similar suspicion had been nagging at me since the call. Something about the whole situation felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. "Maybe we could do something smaller here," Amanda suggested. "Invite some friends over, watch scary movies, still dress up. It won't be the same as your family tradition, but it could be the start of our own." I appreciated her attempt to salvage something from the disappointment, but my heart wasn't in it. Halloween at my parents' house wasn't just about costumes and candy. It was about continuity, about maintaining a connection to my childhood home even as an adult. It was about seeing the same neighbors year after year, watching their kids grow up, being part of something larger than myself. The next morning, I called my siblings to break the news. Lily seemed surprised but not particularly upset. "That's too bad," she said. "The kids will be disappointed, but we can find somewhere else to trick or treat." Jake's reaction was stranger. There was a long pause after I told him, and when he spoke, his voice had an odd, strained quality. "They told you they're canceling because of money?" "That's what they said?" "Yeah. Apparently they've had some unexpected expenses." "Why? Do you know something I don't?" No, Jake said quickly. "Just surprised, that's all. Listen, I've got to run to a meeting. We'll talk soon, okay?" As I hung up, that nagging feeling intensified. Jake knew something he wasn't telling me. But what could it be? What reason would my parents have to lie about canceling Halloween? Little did I know, I was about to find out exactly what they were hiding, and it would force me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about my family. 2 days after the call that shattered our Halloween plans, I found myself driving to my parents' house. Dad had borrowed my power drill and some specialized bits a few weeks earlier for a project, and I needed them back for some shelving I was planning to install in my apartment. I texted him that morning to let him know I'd be stopping by, but received no response. This wasn't entirely unusual. Dad was notoriously bad at checking his phone, so I decided to swing by anyway. When I arrived, neither of my parents' cars was in the driveway. I checked my watch 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon and remembered that Mom usually worked until 4 on Tuesdays, while Dad was typically at the garage until 5 or later. I still had the emergency key they'd given me years ago, so I decided to let myself in, leave a note about taking back my tools, and be on my way. The house was quiet when I entered, that particular stillness of an empty home in the middle of a weekday. I headed straight for the basement, where Dad kept his tools, and quickly located my drill and bits on his workbench. Task accomplished, I was heading back up the stairs when I remembered I should leave a note. I detoured to the kitchen, where Mom always kept a notepad and pen by the phone. That's when I saw it. Sitting on the kitchen counter, partially obscured by a coffee mug but still clearly visible, was a printed itinerary. At first, I barely registered what I was seeing, just a typical travel document with airline logos and departure times. But as I moved the mug to place my note, certain details jumped out at me. Phoenix, AZ. First class. October 31st. Halloween. My hand froze mid-motion. I blinked, certain I'd misread the date. But no, there it was in black and white. October 31st to November 4th. A 5-day trip to Arizona, departing on Halloween. I picked up the itinerary, my heart beginning to pound in my chest. It wasn't just for my parents. There were 6 tickets listed. Frank and Diane Watson, my parents, Jacob Watson, and guest, my brother and presumably his girlfriend, Lily and Thomas Sullivan, my sister and her husband. 6 people, the entire family, except for me. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the additional pages. A confirmation for a resort in Scottsdale, reservations for a sunset horseback ride through the desert, tickets to a high-end magic show, a prepaid wine tasting tour. This wasn't just a quick getaway. This was an elaborate, expensive family vacation. A vacation they were taking instead of Halloween. A vacation I knew nothing about. I sank onto one of the kitchen stools, the papers clutched in my hand, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There had to be some explanation. Maybe it was a surprise for me? But no, there were only 6 tickets, not 7. And why would they plan a surprise for Halloween, knowing how important that day was to me? I pulled out my phone and texted Jake. "Did you know Mom and Dad are going to Arizona for Halloween weekend?" His response came almost immediately. "They told you?" Finally, my stomach dropped. "No. Found the itinerary at their house." "You knew about this?" There was a long pause before his next message appeared. "Shit. I'm sorry, Bren. They swore they were going to tell you. Said they just needed to figure out the right way." "Tell me what exactly? That the whole family is going on vacation without me? That Halloween is canceled not because of money but because you all made other plans?" "It's complicated," Jake replied. "Can I call you? Just tell me how long you've known." I texted back, my fingers shaking with anger and hurt. "Since July," came the response. "They asked me and Kelly if we wanted to go. I assumed you were invited too. Only found out last month you weren't. I've been trying to convince them to tell you the truth." July. They'd been planning this since July, all while I was excitedly mapping out Halloween plans, sharing my ideas with them, investing my time and creativity into an event they knew wouldn't happen. I texted Lily next. "Nice family vacation to Arizona you've got planned." Unlike Jake, Lily didn't show any remorse. "You weren't supposed to find out like this. But honestly, Brennan, it's just Halloween. It's not that big a deal. We all wanted a real vacation for once." "A real vacation," I repeated aloud to the empty kitchen, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. As if the traditions I valued, the connections I worked to maintain, were somehow less real than a trip to Arizona. I looked again at the itinerary, forcing myself to take in the details I'd missed in my initial shock. The total cost for the flights alone was over $5,000. First-class tickets for 6 people didn't come cheap. Add in the resort, the activities, the meals, and this was easily a $10,000 vacation, so much for tightening our belts. With a growing sense of suspicion, I opened a drawer where Mom kept old bills and financial documents. I shouldn't be snooping, a voice in my head warned, but it was drowned out by the roaring sense of betrayal that was building inside me. I found recent credit card statements and began to flip through them. What I discovered only deepened my sense of shock. For the past 6 months, my parents had been spending freely on luxury items: a new 70-inch television, high-end golf clubs for Dad, a weekend spa retreat for Mom, expensive dinners at restaurants I could never afford. There was no sign of the financial strain they'd claimed was forcing them to cancel Halloween. It had all been a lie. A convenient excuse to cancel a tradition that apparently meant nothing to them, despite how much they knew it meant to me. I gathered up the itinerary and my tools and left without writing the note I'd come to leave. As I drove home, my mind raced with questions. Why exclude me from the family vacation? Why lie about the reason for canceling Halloween? And perhaps most painfully, how long had I been the only one who cared about our family traditions? I'd always assumed that Halloween meant as much to them as it did to me. Now I had to face the possibility that they'd been humoring me all these years, going through the motions while secretly resenting the time and energy our traditions required. I pulled over to the side of the road, suddenly unable to see clearly through the tears that had welled up in my eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like a child again, confused, hurt, and betrayed by the people I loved most in the world. But this time, there was no Halloween magic to make everything better. I spent the next several hours in a daze, alternating between numbing disbelief and searing anger. By evening, I still hadn't decided how to confront my parents. Should I call them out directly? Pretend I knew nothing and see how long they'd maintain the lie? I needed more information before I made my next move. I sent a casual text to Mom. "Hey, just checking in. What are your plans for Halloween weekend? Amanda and I might do something small at my place if you and Dad want to join." Her response came an hour later. "Oh, sweetie, I don't think we'll be up for anything. You know money's tight right now, and your father and I are just going to stay home and relax. But you two have fun." The lie stung even more the second time. Not only were they excluding me from a family vacation, but they were doubling down on the deception even when given a perfect opportunity to come clean. I couldn't hold back anymore. I called Dad's cell phone, my heart pounding as it rang. "Brennan, what's up, son?" His voice was cheerful, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. "I was at the house today to pick up my drill," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I saw the tickets to Arizona." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. When Dad finally spoke, his tone had completely changed. "You were going through our things?" The accusation hit me like a slap. I wasn't going through anything. The itinerary was right there on the kitchen counter. 6 first-class tickets to Phoenix for Halloween weekend. The entire family. Except me. "Listen, Brennan, we were going to tell you." "When? The day before you left? Or were you just going to disappear for 5 days and hope I wouldn't notice?" Dad sighed heavily. "It's not what you think. This trip, it's not really your kind of thing." "My kind of thing?" I repeated, incredulous. "What does that even mean?" "You know, all that outdoor stuff, the horseback riding, the hiking. You've never been into that. And Kelly really wanted to see Arizona, and Lily and Tom need a vacation with the baby coming next year. It just made sense for the 6 of us." His explanation made no sense. I loved the outdoors. I'd been asking my parents to go hiking with me for years, but they always had excuses. And the horseback riding? I'd actually taken lessons in college. So instead of just telling me about the trip and letting me decide if I wanted to go, you made up a story about being broke? You let me believe our family Halloween tradition was being canceled because of money problems? "We didn't want to hurt your feelings," Dad said, but the excuse rang hollow. "We know how much Halloween means to you. If you knew how much it meant to me, why would you plan a vacation that weekend of all weekends? Why not go the week before or after?" Another long pause. "The resort had a special rate that weekend," he finally said, but I could tell even he knew how weak that sounded. The conversation deteriorated from there. Dad became increasingly defensive, accusing me of overreacting and making too big a deal out of just a vacation and just Halloween. The more he downplayed both, the angrier I became, until I was shouting into the phone about years of family traditions that apparently meant nothing to any of them. "You know what, Brennan? This is exactly why we didn't invite you," Dad finally snapped. "Everything always has to be such a production with you. We just wanted a nice, relaxing vacation without having to deal with one of your meltdowns or having every detail planned to death like it's some kind of military operation." His words stunned me into silence. Was that how they saw me? As some kind of control freak they had to deal with? "I've got to go," I managed to say, and hung up before he could respond. I sat in my apartment, the phone still clutched in my hand, feeling as though the floor had dropped out from under my world. My entire perception of my family relationships was crumbling around me. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Just talked to Dad. He said you found out about the trip and freaked out. You okay?" I didn't respond immediately, not trusting myself to remain civil. When I did reply, I kept it simple. "Did you know they were lying to me about being broke as the reason for canceling Halloween?" "Not at first," Jake admitted. "When they invited us in July, they said they'd already talked to you and you couldn't get the time off work. Only found out recently that wasn't true." Another lie. They'd told Jake I couldn't make it, told me they were broke. Different lies for different people, all to avoid the simple truth. They didn't want me along. Jake called a few minutes later, and I answered, hungry for any explanation that might make this situation hurt less. "I'm really sorry, Bren," he said, his voice genuinely remorseful. "I should have told you as soon as I realized what was happening." "Why didn't you?" Jake sighed. I confronted Mom and Dad about it, and they swore they were going to tell you themselves. They made me promise to let them handle it. I guess they never did. No, they told me Halloween was canceled because they couldn't afford it. Meanwhile, they're dropping thousands on first-class tickets and a luxury resort. It's messed up, Jake agreed. And it's not the first time they've done something like this. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? There was a pause, and I could almost see Jake debating how much to reveal. Remember last Thanksgiving when they said they were just having a small dinner with the neighbors because the kitchen was being renovated? Yeah, they actually went to New York. Took Lily and Tom to see the parade and a Broadway show. I only know because Lily posted pictures on Instagram and then panicked and blocked you when she realized what she'd done. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent that Thanksgiving alone, microwaving a sad little turkey dinner for one, believing my family was just a few miles away but too busy with home renovations to host the usual gathering. Why? I asked, the single word encompassing all my confusion and hurt. Why would they exclude me like this? What did I do? Jake was quiet for a moment. I don't think it's anything you did, exactly. It's more like they see you as the practical one, the responsible one, the one they can count on to watch the house when they're gone, to take care of things they don't want to deal with. But when it's time for something fun, they'd rather I wasn't there. I finished for him. It's not right, Jake said quickly. I'm not defending them. I just think that's how they see things. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, not bothering to turn on the lights as the sun set. The picture Jake had painted was devastating, but rang true. How many times had my parents called me to help with practical matters, fixing a leaky faucet, setting up a new TV, driving them to medical appointments while keeping me at arm's length for celebrations and vacations. I thought about all the times I'd rearranged my schedule to be there for them, all the nights and weekends I'd sacrificed to maintain our family traditions. I'd believed I was a valued part of the family unit, someone whose presence was desired rather than merely tolerated for what I could provide. The realization that I'd been cast in the role of useful outsider rather than beloved family member shook me to my core. But as the initial shock began to fade, another emotion took its place: determination. If this was how they wanted things to be, then perhaps it was time for me to redefine my role in the family on my own terms. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt since discovering the tickets. Amanda had stayed over, holding me as I alternated between angry rants and periods of stunned silence. Now, as we sat at my small kitchen table drinking coffee, she watched me with concern. You look different today, she observed. Less devastated, more resolved. I nodded. I've been thinking about what Jake said, about how they see me as the practical one they can count on but don't necessarily want around for the fun stuff. That's their loss, Amanda said firmly. You're the most fun person I know. Her loyalty warmed me, but I remained focused on my train of thought. The thing is, they've been having it both ways. They exclude me when it suits them, but they still expect me to be there whenever they need something. Like organizing Halloween for the whole neighborhood, Amanda said. Exactly. Or watching the house when they're away. Or dealing with service people so they don't have to take time off work. I took a sip of my coffee. But what if I stopped being so available? Amanda raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? Nothing dramatic. I'm not going to cut them off or anything. But maybe it's time to establish some boundaries. As I spoke, I remembered something that had been nagging at the back of my mind since discovering the vacation plans. 3 years ago, when my parents had some financial difficulties after Dad's garage underwent expensive renovations, I'd added them as authorized users on one of my credit cards. It was meant to be for emergencies only, and they'd rarely used it. But recently, I'd noticed some larger charges that I'd assumed were related to the Halloween preparations. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my credit card account. There they were: charges from the resort in Arizona, deposits for some of the activities, even a shopping spree at a high-end outdoor clothing store. They were using my credit card to help fund their secret vacation. They're charging parts of their trip to my card, I said, showing Amanda the screen. The card I gave them for emergencies. Amanda's eyes widened. Wow, that crosses a line. The anger I'd been trying to contain bubbled up again. Not only had they excluded me and lied to me, but they were using my own financial resources to do it. I think I need to remove them as authorized users, I said, reaching for my phone. Are you sure? Amanda asked. That's going to cause a pretty big confrontation. I nodded, already dialing the customer service number on the back of my card. I'm not doing it to be vindictive. I'm doing it because they've demonstrated they can't be trusted to respect the boundaries of what this card was intended for. The call to the credit card company was brief and efficient. Yes, I wanted to remove the authorized users immediately. No, I did not want to issue replacement cards. Yes, I understood this would cancel the existing cards they had. Within 15 minutes it was done. My parents would no longer be able to use my credit for their vacation or anything else. Next, I sent a brief, factual text to my parents. I've removed you as authorized users on my credit card. I noticed charges for your Arizona vacation and wanted to clarify that the card was for emergencies only, not leisure travel I wasn't informed about. Then I sent a separate message to the family group chat, which included my parents, Jake and Lily. Just a heads up that I won't be available to watch anyone's houses or take care of pets from October 31st to November 4th. I'll be busy with alternative Halloween plans. I put down my phone and looked at Amanda. There. Boundaries established. How do you feel? She asked. Honestly, a little guilty, but also relieved. Like I'm finally standing up for myself, instead of just accepting whatever scraps of family inclusion they decide to throw my way. Amanda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, and for what it's worth, I think they've taken advantage of your generosity for way too long. My phone immediately began buzzing with incoming messages, but I ignored it for the moment. So about those alternative Halloween plans. How would you feel about hosting a neighborhood Halloween event at the community center near my apartment? We could invite all the local kids, maybe some of the residents from the senior living facility down the block. Amanda's face lit up. I love it. Halloween with people who actually want to celebrate with you. As we began brainstorming ideas for our new Halloween tradition, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Yes, I was hurt by my family's deception and exclusion. Yes, there would be difficult conversations ahead. But for perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was putting my own needs and feelings first, rather than contorting myself to fit the role they'd assigned me. The guilt I'd initially felt began to fade, as I reminded myself that I wasn't retaliating or trying to punish them. I was simply refusing to continue in a one-sided relationship where I gave everything and received little in return. This wasn't about revenge, it was about self-respect. By that evening, we had the outline of a plan for a community Halloween celebration that would rival anything I'd ever organized at my parents' house. The local community center had availability and was excited about the idea. Several of my neighbors had already volunteered to help when I floated the concept in our building's group chat. Amanda's friends from her theater group were offering to create a spooky performance for the kids. For the first time since the devastating phone call from my mother, I felt genuinely excited about Halloween again. Maybe this was the silver lining to the painful discovery, the push I needed to create new traditions that reflected my current life, rather than clinging to an idealized version of my childhood. As I finally checked my messages that night, I saw frantic texts from my mother asking what was going on with the credit card, angry demands from my father to call him immediately, and a surprisingly supportive message from Jake. Good for you. About time you stood up for yourself. I decided to respond only to Jake. Thanks. It wasn't easy, but it feels right. Halloween celebration at my local community center if you want to skip Arizona and join the fun. His response came quickly. Might just take you up on that. I put my phone on silent and turned to Amanda, who was sketching out decoration ideas for our new Halloween event. You know what? For the first time in years, I'm actually looking forward to seeing what Halloween brings this year. She smiled and leaned over to kiss me. Me too. And Brennan? Your family doesn't deserve you. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I realized that while the pain of betrayal still stung, it was tempered now by a new sense of empowerment. I'd spent years trying to preserve a family dynamic that existed only in my mind. Now I was free to build connections and traditions based on mutual respect and genuine caring, starting with the woman sleeping beside me and the community that had embraced us. 2 days passed without direct contact from my parents, though my phone was filled with increasingly insistent text messages and voicemails. I wasn't ignoring them completely. I just wasn't ready for another confrontation until I'd processed my own feelings more fully. I was also busy with preparations for our community Halloween event, which was rapidly taking shape as neighbors and friends embraced the idea with enthusiasm. On the 3rd day after I'd canceled the credit card, everything exploded. I was at the community center, discussing decoration options with the facilities manager, when my phone began vibrating continuously in my pocket. When I finally checked it, I had 17 missed calls and twice as many text messages, most from my parents, but some from Lily as well. The first voicemail from Dad set the tone. "Brennan, what the hell do you think you're doing? The resort just called to say our card was declined for the horseback riding reservation. Fix this now." Mom's message was more emotionally manipulative. "Sweetheart, I don't know why you're doing this, but we have a family emergency and need to access that card. Please call us back immediately." Lily's texts were openly hostile. "Way to ruin everyone's vacation because you're jealous you weren't invited. Real mature." I stepped outside the community center and called Jake to get the unfiltered truth. "What's going on?" I asked when he picked up. "Mom and Dad are claiming there's a family emergency," Jake snorted. "The only emergency is that their primary payment method for the Arizona trip just got declined, and now they're scrambling to rebook everything with different cards. Apparently they put quite a few deposits on your card, assuming you'd never notice or say anything. How much were they planning to charge to my account? From what I can gather, at least $3,000 of the trip expenses. They're freaking out because most of the activities required deposits, and now those reservations are being canceled one by one." I felt a mixture of vindication and lingering guilt. I hadn't intended to disrupt their vacation plans. I'd simply removed a payment method that was being misused. But a small part of me couldn't help but feel satisfied that they were experiencing at least a fraction of the disappointment I'd felt when I discovered their deception. "Are you still going on the trip?" I asked Jake. "Actually, Kelly and I are talking about backing out. This whole thing leaves a bad taste in my mouth, the way they treated you. Plus, they're now asking us to cover a bigger portion of the costs, since they can't use your card, and we're not made of money." After we hung up, I decided it was time to finally answer my parents' calls. I took a deep breath and dialed my mother's number. She answered on the first ring. "Brennan, thank goodness. We've been trying to reach you for days." "I know, Mom. I needed some space after finding out about the Arizona trip." "This isn't about the trip," she said, though her tone made it clear it absolutely was. "We have an emergency situation with the credit card." "It's not an emergency, Mom. I removed you as authorized users because you were using the card for vacation expenses without my knowledge or permission. That card was for actual emergencies, not first-class flights and horseback riding tours." "We were going to pay you back," she insisted. "When? After the trip I wasn't supposed to know about? After you came back from the vacation you told me you couldn't afford while canceling a tradition you knew was important to me?" There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had taken on the wounded tone she used when she wanted to make me feel guilty. "I don't understand why you're punishing us like this. We're your parents. We've done everything for you. I'm not punishing you. I'm establishing a boundary. There's a difference." "Well, your boundary is ruining a trip we've been planning for months. Is that what you wanted?" The unfairness of her accusation stung. "No, Mom. I wanted to be included in family plans. I wanted honesty instead of elaborate lies. I wanted to be treated like an equal member of this family, instead of the convenient helper you keep around for practical tasks but exclude when it comes to enjoyable experiences." "That's not fair," she protested, but I noticed she didn't actually deny it. "Isn't it? Jake told me about the Thanksgiving trip to New York last year. And how many other events have there been that I don't know about? How long have I been the only one who cared about maintaining family traditions while the rest of you were creating new ones without me?" My mother was silent for a long moment. "Your father wants to speak to you," she finally said, and before I could respond, Dad was on the line. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low and controlled in a way that indicated he was furious. "You are going to call the credit card company right now and reinstate our cards. This childish tantrum has gone far enough." "No, Dad, I'm not going to do that. Those cards were for emergencies, not for funding a secret vacation. If you don't fix this right now, don't bother coming to Thanksgiving or Christmas this year. In fact, don't bother considering yourself part of this family at all." The threat hit hard, but not in the way he intended. Rather than intimidating me into compliance, it confirmed everything I'd been coming to understand about my place in the family dynamic. If my presence in the family is conditional on me financing your vacation and never objecting to being lied to and excluded, then maybe I need to rethink what family means to me, I said quietly. Dad spluttered with rage, but I continued before he could launch into another tirade. "I'm not calling the credit card company. I'm not reinstating the cards. And I'm not going to continue pretending that this relationship is healthy or fair. When you're ready to talk about why you felt it was necessary to lie to me and exclude me from family plans, I'll be here. Until then, I think we all need some space." I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. I wasn't closing the door on reconciliation, but I was refusing to continue in the dysfunctional patterns that had defined our relationship for too long. My phone immediately began ringing again, but I silenced it and turned back to the community center. Amanda was waiting at the entrance, concern evident on her face. "That looked intense," she said. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath. "Yeah, I think I am." For maybe the first time in my relationship with my parents, I stood my ground instead of caving to avoid conflict. "It doesn't feel great right now, but I think it was necessary." She slipped her arm through mine. "I'm proud of you. And for what it's worth, the Halloween plans are coming together amazingly. Wait until you see what the drama club kids came up with for the haunted hallway." As we walked back inside to continue preparations, I realized that while one door might be temporarily closing in my life, others were opening. Maybe that's what growing up was really about, not just maintaining childhood traditions but having the courage to create new ones when the old ones no longer served you. Later that evening, I received a text from Jake. "Kelly and I are officially out of the Arizona trip. Would rather spend Halloween with my brother anyway. Need help with your community center thing?" As I typed back an enthusiastic, "Yes," I felt the first stirrings of genuine excitement about the holiday. Perhaps this Halloween would be different from what I'd originally planned, but different didn't have to mean worse. Sometimes it could mean better. Halloween arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air, a gentle breeze, and leaves crunching underfoot as Amanda and I made our final preparations at the community center. The transformation of the space exceeded even my ambitious vision. The main hall had become a not-too-scary haunted mansion for the younger kids, while the East Wing housed a genuinely frightening experience for teens and adults, courtesy of Amanda's theater friends. The courtyard was set up for trick-or-treating stations, games, and a costume contest. I was adjusting a motion-activated ghost when a familiar voice called my name. I turned to find Jake and his girlfriend Kelly, already in costume as zombie hikers, a wry nod to the Arizona trip they'd abandoned. "This is incredible," Jake said, surveying the decorated space. "Way better than anything we ever did at Mom and Dad's." "Thanks for coming," I said, genuinely moved by his show of support. "It means a lot." "Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss it. Besides, horseback riding gives me saddle sores." He looked around at the volunteers busily making final adjustments to decorations and setting up treat stations. "What can we do to help?" For the next hour, we all worked together to put the finishing touches on the space. Jake's easy humor and Kelly's creative input blended seamlessly with the community spirit that had emerged around the event. By the time we opened the doors at 5 o'clock, I felt a sense of accomplishment and belonging that surpassed anything I'd experienced in years of organizing Halloween at my parents' house. The evening was a tremendous success. Children from the neighborhood arrived in waves, their eyes wide with delight at the spooky decorations and generous treat stations. Residents from the senior living facility came early, some in costume themselves, eager to hand out candy to young trick-or-treaters. Amanda, dressed as a Victorian ghost similar to the costume she'd worn when we first met, captivated groups of children with spooky but age-appropriate stories in a candlelit corner. As I watched the joy spreading through the community center, neighbors introducing themselves to each other, children laughing, seniors sharing Halloween stories from their own childhoods, I realized that this was what I'd always been trying to create, not just a celebration of a holiday, but a genuine connection between people who might otherwise remain strangers. "You've got a gift for this," Jake said, appearing at my side with a cup of hot cider, bringing people together, creating experiences. It was never about Mom and Dad's house, was it? It was always about what you brought to it. His observation struck me with the force of revelation. I'd been so focused on maintaining the tradition in the specific location of my childhood home that I'd missed the larger truth. The magic of Halloween wasn't tied to a place, but to the connections formed there. "I guess you're right," I admitted. "I just never thought about it that way." The evening continued with costume contests, spooky dance performances by local kids, and an unexpected highlight when some of the seniors taught the children Halloween games from the 1950s. By the time we closed the doors at 9:30, everyone was exhausted but exhilarated. The community center director had already asked if we could make it an annual event. As Amanda and I were cleaning up, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Hope you had a good Halloween. The resort lost our horseback riding reservation because of the card issue. Your father is very upset." I showed the message to Amanda, who raised an eyebrow. "Still trying to make you feel guilty, I see." "Old habits die hard," I said, putting the phone away without responding. I wasn't going to let the manipulation tactic spoil what had been a wonderful evening. A week later, my parents returned from Arizona. The day after their return, they showed up unannounced at my apartment, bearing souvenir magnets and forced smiles. "We brought you a little something," Mom said, holding out a paper bag as if the cheap airport gifts could bridge the chasm that had opened between us. I invited them in but remained standing, unwilling to settle into the comfortable patterns that had defined our relationship for so long. "We need to talk about what happened," I said directly. "Not just about the credit card, but about the pattern of excluding me from family events while expecting me to be available whenever you need something practical." Dad started to bristle, but Mom put a hand on his arm. "We never meant to hurt you," she said. "We just thought, well, Halloween has always been your thing. We didn't think you'd want to miss it for a vacation. Then why not tell me that? Why make up a story about money problems? Why not let me decide for myself whether I wanted to go?" They exchanged glances, and in their silent communication, I saw the truth they were still unwilling to verbalize. They hadn't invited me because they preferred a vacation without me. Whether it was my planning tendencies that Dad found annoying, or simply that they enjoyed a different family dynamic when I wasn't present, the fact remained that my exclusion had been deliberate. "We handled it poorly," Mom finally admitted. "We should have been honest with you. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I'd hoped for, but it was a start." We spent the next hour in an awkward but necessary conversation, establishing new boundaries and expectations. I made it clear that I would no longer be available for one-sided assistance without reciprocal inclusion in family events. They agreed, though I sensed it was more about avoiding further conflict than genuine understanding of how their actions had affected me. As they were leaving, Dad paused at the door. "We saw the article about your community Halloween event in the local paper. It looked impressive." Coming from him, it was as close to praise as I was likely to get. "It was a great night," I said simply. "Jake and Kelly came. You should consider joining us next year." The invitation hung in the air, a tentative bridge across the divide. Dad nodded once, non-committal but not dismissive, and then they were gone. In the months that followed, our family dynamic shifted in subtle but significant ways. My parents were more careful about including me in invitations, though I sometimes declined, preferring to spend time with the new circle of friends I'd made through the Halloween event. Jake and I grew closer, our shared experience having broken down some of the distance that had developed between us as adults. Lily remained cooler, still viewing me as the troublemaker who had disrupted her vacation plans, but even she made occasional efforts to include me in family gatherings. 6 months after that fateful Halloween, Amanda moved in with me, as we unpacked her belongings and integrated them with mine, creating a shared life in physical form. I found myself reflecting on how much had changed since the day I discovered those tickets to Arizona. "Do you ever regret it?" Amanda asked, as we arranged her books alongside mine on the shelves. "Standing up to your family, I mean. It's been a hard road." I considered the question seriously. The past 6 months had indeed been challenging, with strained holiday gatherings and occasional relapses into old patterns that required firm reinforcement of boundaries. But alongside those difficulties had been unexpected joys, deepened friendships with neighbors, a stronger relationship with Jake, and most significantly, the liberation of no longer contorting myself to fit others' expectations. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. I regret that it was necessary, but not that I did it." She smiled and handed me another stack of books. "For what it's worth, I think it made you stronger, more authentic. It taught me something important," I reflected. "Family isn't just about blood relations, it's about mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Sometimes the family you choose is more nurturing than the one you're born into." As spring turned to summer, planning began for the second annual community Halloween celebration. This time, we had a committee of eager volunteers, a budget from local businesses, and ambitious plans to expand into the park adjacent to the community center. Jake and Kelly were heavily involved, bringing fresh ideas and energy to the planning sessions. To my surprise, during one of these meetings, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Dad and I were wondering if you need any help with the Halloween planning this year. We're free on weekends." It wasn't a grand apology or a complete transformation of our relationship, but it was an olive branch, an acknowledgement that my new tradition had value and that perhaps they wanted to be part of it on the new terms I'd established. "What do you think?" I asked Amanda, showing her the message. She squeezed my hand. "I think family relationships are always evolving. Maybe this is the next stage of yours." I texted back an invitation to the next planning meeting, neither expecting too much nor closing the door on the possibility of healing. Whatever happened next, I knew I would face it from a place of newfound strength and self-respect. As I look toward this year's Halloween, I'm filled with anticipation rather than anxiety. The holiday that once served as a tenuous connection to my childhood home has become a celebration of the life and community I've built as an adult. The betrayal that seemed devastating a year ago ultimately freed me to create something more authentic and fulfilling. Perhaps that's the most valuable lesson I've learned through all of this. Sometimes the painful dismantling of illusions is necessary for genuine growth. By letting go of the family dynamic I'd clung to for so long, I created space for relationships based on mutual respect rather than convenient roles and unspoken expectations. Have you ever had to redefine a family relationship or tradition? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Consider sharing this with someone who might need encouragement to establish healthy boundaries in their own relationships. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most meaningful traditions are the ones we have the courage to create ourselves.